Now it is my pleasure to introduce tonight's main speaker, Chris from Redondo Beach.
Right? What can I tell you? I'm Chris, I'm an alcoholic. Thank you, Tom, for asking me to speak tonight. Oh, shit howdy, what can I tell you? Let me see. The first thing came to mind was don't get showered, wear clean underwear and a dress to a meeting that's not your own, right? But here I am. I don't know. Chris, alcoholic, and I'm grateful to be here. I'm grateful to be in any meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm grateful to be in the place that saved my life. Literally saved my life. And it is an honor and a privilege to be a part of and a member in good standing in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's truly an honor and a privilege. And I am, my sobriety date is April 27th, 1984. I'm a little bit nervous. And the prayer I'm going to say is, please God, don't let me suck, right? Because just because. No, I said a prayer, and a prayer that I say anytime I go to share in a general way about what happened, what it was like, and what it's like now is, that prayer that just says, dear God, let me drop from the place that, my mind is spinning and it all comes down, it just boils down and lands in my heart. Because I always want to give a message that's absolutely from my heart, not from my head. Because Alcoholics Anonymous has been a place that has brought me down a path that I have learned to live more in the present moment and live in a place that's in my heart and appreciate the things that are around me in the moment, But we're taught here also to share in a general way what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. And I think storytelling is so powerful, and so we tell our stories in a very general way. And that is the thing that connected me when I got sober right off the bat. My parents were parents who started seeking help for me when I was, an adolescent because of the path that I was already going down. And it wasn't until I met a man at the time that I, sought help, who shared his story with me. And all the police officers I had run into, all the counseling I had done, all the whatever had happened, I had never sat across the table with someone who shared their story in a very few minutes in a very general way and said, and you may relate to this, right? And it made all the difference in the world. So our storytelling is very powerful. That's why there's many stories in the back of our big book. All over the map, those stories are. One, they show, the book tells me that it shows, how people's relationship to God eventually, developed, but it's that way of relating, if you don't relate up front in the book, send them to the back of the book first. I don't know, and see if that works, right? And for many people it does. So I'll tell you in a general way, I was born and raised in Redondo Beach. Did I say I have a sobriety date, April 27th, 1984? The youngest of three, my family, my parents wanted a girl. I don't think they knew what they were, getting, to be quite honest with you. They were very ill-equipped for what was to come their way, I will tell you that. Although my dad had a built-in Al-Anon program, it seemed, and that didn't fare well for me. It wasn't good for me. But, I always had this yearning to kind of go off to the wild side and see what was, a little bit better over there than was happening in my house, or that playground over there instead of this stupid little park that I was at. It was like something always called me from beyond. So I was always looking for fun. I was always looking for something a little bit different. It wasn't that I didn't feel like I didn't fit in my own skin, that I couldn't reach my hand out, that I couldn't whatever. It was just, I know there's something better happening somewhere else. There's something more fun happening. I didn't want to be in my little Girl Scout uniform making little Indian eyes and, all these other little crafts and things that we did. I knew that out there was yonder, and yonder called me from a very early age. Didn't have any idea what that was about. I went to Catholic school for a few years. My parents shelled out a lot of money for that for a few years. And at some point in time, I exited that Catholic school program. I have a feeling I know why, although I never directly asked them that question, why. I got caught on the playground doing some song that had some, silly little whatever, and it was not the best of song to be singing out on the Catholic, playground, and I got caught for that. And sometime after that, it was, I went into a public school. When I went into the public school, I met a lot of kids that were doing things that we weren't doing on the Catholic playground, right? And it was, like I said, it was very attractive to me. That was in 5th grade that I went in there, and that's when I started smoking cigarettes. I stole my first pack of cigarettes in 4th grade. I was in still my Catholic girl uniform, my pea coat, my little plaid skirt. I got caught doing that, and my mom made me give them back to the manager of the store. She said, what's in your pocket? You need to give those back, and you need to go explain yourself to him. And it didn't deter me. So when I went off to this public school, I started meeting all kinds of kids that were doing different things. And one of the first friends that I created in there, her nickname was Dumpy. And that might give you a clue to something going on in this kid's life. And her dad rode motorcycles with Steve McQueen. Her mom was like hippie, wore these flowing skirts. They smoked pot at their house. And I thought that was all very cool. And I remember hearing Dumpy saying she had dropped acid at one point in time and ended up running down the street naked. And I'm like, what? But there was something about that was like, this is interesting to me. This perked my ears. It was, Dumpy became my very best friend. And so, I didn't drink really any alcohol in 5th and 6th grade, but I did some other things that we're not supposed to talk about from the podium, but they are accoutrements that went right along with, down the path that I went down. And I started smoking weed when I was in 5th and 6th grade, and I started taking bennies when I was in 6th grade. Somebody had a little thing of tin foil, and they were all rolled up, and it was interesting. It was good at that age. And then I went into, 7th and 8th grade, and that's where I started to drink. There was dances happening, and people from other schools came together, and that's where drinking started to happen for me. And I loved everything about it. I loved what happened when I drank. I loved the preparations for the drink. I loved the sneaking, the lying, I won't say I loved it, but I think what I loved about it was the adrenaline of it. It was the adrenaline that, got me kind of a little bit, going. And drinking was fun. Drinking was just absolutely fun. It enhanced everything that I did. I was a good kid. My parents were good parents. I had 2 older brothers, one who had gone off the same path that I was on. My middle brother was the angel. There was nothing he could do wrong, and he was a royal pain to follow because there was just nothing that he could do wrong. And once I started to drink, my interest in school changed, my interest in friends changed, my interest in hobbies changed, my interest in just about everything changed. I remember my parents coming home from what should have been a baccalaureate for my oldest brother. He should have graduated from high school. He didn't because he was on the same path, and I remember the sadness, the crying, all the stuff. He didn't show up, and they didn't know that. And I remember saying, I will never do that to my parents. I will never, ever, ever do that to my parents. And lo and behold, that's the path that I went down. I was a great student. I joined swim team. I think most of us are smart. I think most of us can really apply ourselves and do really well at anything we want to do in this world. But once, for me especially, I can't speak for you, for me, that was my case. But once I started to drink and go down that road, alcohol took me down the path it wanted to take me down. And it wasn't anything I set out to do. It wasn't the place I set out to go. But the places that I went were the places that alcohol took me. And God darn, I had a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun till I didn't have a lot of fun. And I did not graduate from school from my come my senior year. I had already been put in a remedial class, started out in, college prep classes, and I ended up in remedial classes. I wrote every single note that, was in my file for school because I'm good at that kind of stuff. If you need to get by and you need to go down a path that I went down, you need to come up with some skills like that, right off the bat. And so I was good at signing my mom's name. I was good at coming up with stories. I was good at beating home my report cards. I was good at all that kind of stuff and sneaking and getting away with the things I needed to get away with to go have the fun I wanted to have. And so by the time I was 17, I was in remedial classes. They were like, okay, we just really want to get you through school and have you graduate. They were pulling for me. But I ran away from home. I was a few blocks from my parents' house. I packed everything I needed that I thought I needed, some hefty bags. My girlfriend, or friend of mine, had her mom's car, pulled up in her blue Monte Carlo. And I knew that, the doo-doo was about to hit the fan in my house and a lot of stuff was about to get, found out in my home. And so she picked me up and I moved about 5 blocks from my parents' house. I got a job right off the bat, got somebody to lend me a car right off the bat. And I went to work and started to have the fun I wanted to have and thought, I should have. By God, I'm, now 18. It's like fun is on. I'm a party girl. I'm a concert girl, I'm a camper, I'm a skier, I'm a, water skier. I am all about all this kind of stuff. And what goes hand in hand with all of that? Drinking, by God, drinking. And I had an awful lot of fun. So, can you tell I'm nervous? This is not my usual pitch. So, the next couple years, if you're a drinker like I am, drinking became everything about everything that I did. And I had a lot of hopes, a lot of dreams for where I was going to go in life and the things that I was going to do. And I will tell you that drinking robbed me of every single one of those dreams, hopes, all the things that I thought I would do with my life, ended up, just going right out the window. I did not go back to school for many years, but I was good at getting jobs. I was good at working, and I was good at getting jobs. Unfortunately, I was good at getting fired from those jobs and leaving those jobs under circumstances that were not, the best, but I was good about getting another job. And leading the lifestyle that I did, there was all kinds of craziness that happened to me. I became a huge liar, cheat, and thief. I was telling somebody the other day about, last car that I had stolen tags on it. You couldn't even shut the back of it was a Volkswagen Squareback. Couldn't shut the back of the Volkswagen Squareback because a friend of mine who was drunk following me home from a bar one night ended up running into me, and so you couldn't any longer shut it. My brother, who is a sheriff, I ended up giving this car to my brother because he really needed a car and he lived up in Santa Ynez. And so I'm like, hey, you can take my car. I got another car, and whatever. So my brother's driving this car up Santa Ynez, up the grade up there. It's got stolen tags on it, which he finds out later, being a sheriff, doesn't dawn on me, right? And he's like, what the hell did you do with this car? And I'm like, it's a car. It runs. I had another car that I just left on the side of the road. I totaled it. My dad's like, where's the car? I'm like, I don't know, it's parked on Burl Street somewhere. He's like, you can't just leave a car on the street. And I'm like, well, Dad, it's total. It's like, let somebody pick it for parts. I don't know. I remember my dad looking at me like he had, like I had 3 heads. Like what has gotten into you? Like, this is not the daughter that I raised. And that's the stuff that, I ended up doing. And I know that I had great parents who were great examples to me, good people in the world. They wanted a nice family. They did all the things. I had ballet lessons, music lessons, not anything hoity-toity. We were just run-of-the-mill. But alcohol took me away from all those things and led me down that different path. A myriad of things happened. I went through job after job after job, and my last job at Xerox Corporation, I ended up stealing letterhead from Xerox because I knew I'd land in another job somewhere, and I knew no one would write a letter of recommendation for me. So I wrote, I can write very well, and I wrote a wonderful letter of recommendation for myself, and I got into come on, people. You got to have skills if you're a person like me. You have to have skills if you're going to make it in this world and you're doing the things that I am doing, right? And so I wrote a wonderful letter of recommendation, and I got into an aerospace company. And, the God of my understanding, it's so often that things happen that seem to fall in place in ways that I could really never explain. And I passed my 90 days probationary period, and I remember HR coming back to me and asking me, we have checked out this letter that Mr. Faulkner wrote. I still know his name. That Mr. Faulkner wrote, and it doesn't seem like all these facts line up, according to him. And by this time, I have become an absolute chronic liar, and out of my mouth rolls, the lie of, yes, I know we left on very bad terms, and this and that, and da-da-da. I mean, it's like without even thinking of it, that's what would roll off my tongue, whatever I needed to say to you to get by in the world. And so I'm past 90 days of my probationary period, and I got to stay at this company. And so it was just a very short time after that. I had been on Palm Springs. Who likes to go to Palm Springs? I do. When do we leave? It doesn't matter that you have to take a couple days off of work. I'd been caught in that lie before too. Oh, my grandma died. Well, it's the third time grandma died, and they wanted to send. That's how I left Xerox. Exactly. They wanted to send flowers, to the funeral home because I'm a nice girl at work, right? And they wanted to send flowers to the funeral home. And there was no funeral home to send flowers to. So anyways, one thing led to another, and I was out of there with letterhead in hand. And so, I'm 6 months into this job. I'm in Palm Springs, and it was very bad. My life by this point in time was literal living hell. It was awful. I'm a girl who can't look in the mirror anymore. I'm a girl who can't look at you in the eye anymore. I would steal from you whatever it was that I needed that you had without the blink of an eye. I, have been to jail a number of times. I am smoking, tons of PCP at this point in time. I'm smoking cocaine. I am drinking like a foolish fish, and it's not a pretty picture, right? I'm practically living out of that little another squareback that I had. I'm doing a little bit of couch surfing at this point in time, and trying to hold down this job, and I end up in this weekend in Palm Springs, and it is at that point where I already knew my life was just, you've got to get some help sooner or later, or even worse things are going to happen. And that weekend out there was just a weekend that some really bad stuff happened, and the police did come to the hotel and ask us to please make sure the motorcycles left. We left and don't ever come back to Palm Springs. It was one of those weekends. I traveled with a blender in a nice little box. We had all our accoutrements that needed to go to the hotel. It was those kind of weekends, right? And when I came back to work, there was something in me that I knew. I had already been to an AA meeting or two, with one with my mom. I used to take my mom to AA meetings when she got sober, and I thought they were a royal pain in the rear end. I mean, you people were happy, and you were like, slapping each other and high-fiving and cleaning ashtrays and coffee cups, and I had to wait for her for all that stuff to happen, and then, it was just like, oh my God. And I heard nothing, saw nothing. And then I was working at the Forum as a second job because you need two incomes when you do the things that I do. And so I was working at a job, and this girl that worked with me was also going to AA, and she saw very much that I needed help. And I remember her taking me to an AA dance. If you are out there and you are new and someone takes you to an AA dance, take your own car so you have an escape mechanism, right? Because I was not ready for this dance. And take your own car. But something about that, she ended up leading me to a meeting somehow. And I remember it was a guy named Father Leo that talked. And I was at a point in my life where I was like the flat line on a heart monitor. I didn't laugh about anything. I was just dead inside. I was existing as far as I was concerned, and life was awful. And she took me to this meeting, and I remember laughing at something that got said. And it was like, whoa, where did that come from? Because laughter out of me would be like if we went to a movie together, and there was something funny or a comedy show or whatnot. I mean, I'm like flat, but I would laugh so you wouldn't think that I was odd. When I'd see you laugh, I'd laugh. That's where I had gotten to. And So I remember going to this meeting and hearing Father Leo, and I remember laughing. He was hysterical, actually, but I related, and that's what I heard people say afterwards. That laughter means you're relating to something. And so it was a little while later that, this all went down in Palm Springs, and I knew that I was about to lose my job, but more importantly, I knew that I was about to lose my life. I knew that, the things that I was doing, the neighborhoods that I was going in, I had had a gun put in the back of my head. I had had a couple police officers, come up behind my car one day and say, we watch you coming in and out of here day in, day out, and it's something bad's going to happen to you sooner or later, and we don't want to see you be another statistic. There is absolutely no reason for you to be coming into these neighborhoods other than what you're coming for, and we know, right? Either you're going to get hurt or we're going to arrest you. And I did get hurt. I had a very bad, encounter that, was not pleasant. One of the worst things you could think of happening to yourself or to, your daughter. And those things happened, and yet, you'd go back and do them again, and I'd be back in that neighborhood again. And so after this weekend happened, I came back to work, and I had a friend I had told about, I knew somebody that may need help one day, and we'd had that conversation. She said, well, our work offers, whatever. And so I called her and I said, I am that person. There is no other friend. I am that person. And she led me to our employee assistance program. And I met a beautiful man by the name of Frank Huddleston, who ended up going, after a long time sober. He was with someone who was not in sobriety and ended up having a drink at some point in time. But Frank was my Eskimo. Frank was that guy that sat across that table. When I walked into his office and I told him a little bit about what was going on, Frank said to me, he said, I think I can share something with you and you may relate. And he told me a little bit about his story, and he said, there's a program for people like you and me, and it's called Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'll tell you, it has saved my life. And he said, if you're interested, I'll tell you a little bit more. And they put me into a 5-week program from my work. And so I went into that program, and they gave me a big book, a 12 and 12, a 24-hour-a-day book. I know that's not conference approved, but a 24-hour-a-day book, and they gave me a notebook with a lot of note paper in it. And I had a roommate. She was a Valium addict, and oh my God, that lady coming off of that stuff was crazy. But I remember the first morning there, they said, okay, now, they'd make this announcement. Come down to room B and bring your, 12 and 12 and your notebook and your feelings. And I looked at her and I went, I don't have the book on feelings. And she's like, sure, feelings. And I'm like, your feelings, and I'm just like, I'm the flat line on the heart monitor at this point in time. And so I marched down the hall to the, to whatever room it was. But this place was filled with people like me, people like me where I finally heard stories like mine. People like me who were coming into the meetings they had at night, that were sober, and they had their families with them, and they had a light in their eyes, and they were laughing for real, and they were coming back Wednesday night and Thursday night, Saturday night, and, and I'm like, all right, and there was something attractive that I started to find there. I didn't see it at those other meetings. Yes, I had that laughter with Father Leo, but not when I was taking my mom to the meeting, until my life was on the line and the student was ready. And I'm so grateful that it was grounded in Alcoholics Anonymous and that they gave me those books when I walked into the door and didn't give me a lot of other stuff. And sure, we learned a lot of facts and a lot of things about, alcoholism, but where I learned about alcoholism is in the book of Alcoholics Anonymous and what the disease of alcoholism really is. Because I always wondered, what the hell is the matter with me? Why is it? I know what's happening. I am just filled with sadness and depression and all this stuff, and not the clinical terms of that. My life is in the toilet, and I see my friends who are going on and they're getting jobs and they're keeping those jobs and they're buying cars and they're paying for those cars and, doing all the things, and they enroll in classes and they follow through with school, and none of those things could I do. I'd start off and I'd want to do them, and then I'd party. Right, and I'm taking down that path, and I take 1 drink, 2 drinks, 3 drinks, and I am gone. And let's go to the river, and let's go to Mammoth, and let's go whatever, because that's what I do. And so when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, you guys gave me the answer. You explained to me what it was and why I couldn't. You know, you explained to me the insanity that it talks about in the book, the inability to recall, you know, what happened to me, you know, a day, a week, a month ago. The inability to, you know, walk into some place. I've got, you know, I had crashed my car. I've got my face is, you know, full of stitches, and I got a little tube hanging out of my, you know, my face. I went to jail that time, and, you know, and yet I had friends who were having a party down the street from me for 4th of July and swearing, I am not going to drink. I am not going to drink, but I'm going to go down there and say hi to all those people. That's the insanity of it. You know, somewhere inside I know I'm going to drink, but I make up my mind that I am not going to drink. And I walk into that party, and there's the washing machine filled with cold ice and beer. And I'm like, that is freaking genius. Who does that? The washing machine. And my hand is on the beer before I can ever think about it. And I'm sucking down that beer, and I am off to the races once again, with just having seen the plastic surgeon in another crashed car, right? And that's the insanity of it. And that's the stuff that started to get explained to me in, you know, in our big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and from another woman who sat across the table with me and started to teach me, not teach me this stuff, but tell me her story, right? And explain these things to me. And start taking me through the steps before I even think I was, you know, I could clear my mind and possibly go through the steps. And just because of her experience, and just because of her patience, and just because knowing that, you know, her life was on the line too. And she was willing to sit across the table with me and spend that time and read that book and go through things. You don't know what that word is? Let's kick out a dictionary here. Let's take a look at the dictionary. What does that really mean? You know, the patience, the love, the compassion was something that I had not, you know, encountered to what I found here in Alcoholics Anonymous. And so slowly by slowly, I kept that job by the hair of my chinny chin chin there at that, you know, at Raytheon. I came back a sober woman, and I came back within 5 weeks. They saw a different person come back through those doors, right? You know, I'm the girl that stole all the money out of the coffee pool. I mean, there's things that, you know, you're like so embarrassed. We have these great stories, all the stuff that happens to us, and we're okay with telling all that. But when I tell you I sugared a gas tank, I stole from the coffee pool, I did all those, you know, puny, stupid little things, others like, oh my God, really? Who are you? You know? Yeah, I mean, you know, but I came back and they saw a changed person, and I started to change right off the bat. And, you know, it was slow, because I had a very scrambled head with all those things that I told you I was ingesting, and I ingested for a long time, you know, and I'm not a quick learner. I'm not a real intellectual person, but I am a person who can apply themselves. And by God, I saw that I had a life worth saving, you know, and you saw that I had a life worth saving. And so I started to go through that book and take those steps, and you know, to realize that I'm powerless over alcohol was pretty much a no-brainer for me. You know, I had seen it, and then you started to point it out, and you asked me to point it out, and how many people tried to get me help, and how often had I tried, you know, to said I was going to stop, and all these things, and see, you know, how come that didn't work? You know, well, I had no power when it comes to alcohol, you know, and see that, and really see that my life had become unmanageable. That was a no-brainer too. I mean, look at me, you know, I'm a hot mess. You know, I've got no teeth in the bottom, and, you know, I mean, I was a hot mess. And so to get through, you know, those first 3 steps for me was a big deal. And then to pick up that 800-pound pencil and write an inventory was a really big deal. And I am a 7th-inning ball player. You know, I will go 7 innings and see you later. And it was that way with everything in my life. And so finally to do that, and the sponsor who just said, you know what, just write down your deepest, darkest secrets, just write down the stuff and just do it in this kind of way. Didn't take me through the column method at first, you know, but you'll learn something about yourself. And I learned something about myself, and I shed a lot of stuff that I didn't want to carry forward. And that was a big deal for me, because I had never told, you know, another person some of these things, or had a person I could trust in my life to tell some of these things. And I felt like, you know, that 40-pound weight was off my shoulder to start. You know, the days came when I started to take inventory. That was, you know, out of the book in the column method, that I learned a lot more about myself, that I had some meat to really work with. I got down to causes and conditions and the things that really made me tick and why I did some of those things. And I love how the 12 and 12 lays some of it out, you know, with our instincts gone awry, you know, filled with fear. You know, I didn't know I was filled with. I wouldn't have told you I have any fear. You know, I'm a strong woman. I'm whatever. I don't have any fears. And you start to get underneath that stuff, and lo and behold, guess what? Fear stopped me in my tracks and turned into anxiousness, and, where I just spin and, all this stuff. And I started to learn some things about myself in there. And I had something that I could take somewhere. Where did I take it? I took some of that stuff into my step 6 and 7. And 6 and 7, I think, can become very powerful steps as we go forward. To me, it's just a place where I go, you know what? I want to be rid of these things and make room for something new. And unless I get rid of stuff, I don't have a chance of making room for anything new. And and along the way, I'm a girl, I having that Catholic school background, I was not scarred by a Catholic girl education because I didn't pay attention when I was in school, number one, to the things that you were telling me. But, but I did have some concept of a loving God. And I over the course of years, I have come to know that came, one, from my mom, and two, from my grandma. My grandma was a woman of faith. She raised kids. Her husband died early. And, I would see her. She had her little books and her rosary and all this stuff every single day. And she put everything she had into her, into her prayer life. And she never scolded. She never brought that up in a way that was, you're going to get punished or anything like that. And I didn't hear that stuff in Catholic school. So I am grateful for that I walked into the rooms having something that wasn't tarnished or scarred. But I do believe that, in our book, we have We Agnostics. And I believe it is a very overlooked chapter that many people never dive into that because it's, we need to get to a place where we have a God of our understanding and some sort of understanding, right, of that. If I am powerless and I need power in my life, I better find it somewhere. This is my experience, right? And so, as I walked through those steps, I knew that there was something out there along with Alcoholics Anonymous and the process that was happening to me that was starting to change me and transform me. It wasn't just the work that I was doing. And everything in my life started to change. I became a better worker. I became a person who went to work to earn a paycheck instead of just show up for Friday and you got it. I've been here all damn week now. I didn't go to Mexico and miss Monday and Friday. I've been here all week. Where's my paycheck, right? That was my attitude, right? And I became a woman who wanted to work and earn a paycheck, who wanted to feel good about herself. I started to feel good about myself in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, taking service commitments, right? It was like, oh my God, I followed through with that. I told them I'd be there at 7. I was there at 7. Before it would have been, 7:45, and the excuse of why I wasn't there at 7, or why I never showed up at all. And so, Alcoholics Anonymous started to lay all those little things in line. Suit up and show up. Who knew just suiting up and showing up would change the course of things for me in a way? Who knew some of these silly slogans, first things first, it's like would change the course of, of my life for me and my work life and my family life and all that kind of stuff. And walking through those steps and starting to make amends. Oh my God, I wouldn't have done half that stuff if I knew I was going to have to go back and make some of these amends. I surely wouldn't have done some of that stuff. But one of the biggest deals is to be able to go back to people and make amends. When I've sat with somebody who's taught me it wasn't just about stealing the money. Do you know you robbed them of their sense of safety and security? Oh my God, that would have never entered. It was cash register honesty, those kind of things that I thought, Do you know that you had a mother who really wanted to do these things with her daughter, and alcoholism and the things you did in your life robbed her of those beautiful moments and experiences that she otherwise would have had. Just have the talk with her, right? That deepened my relationship with my mom. To be able to sit with both of my parents and say to them, I realized the strife that was caused between the two of you, and the arguments and the things that, and have them nod their heads and know that, all those, that worry and that where is she? And Dad's just going to bed because it's like she's either going to be all right or she's not. That built an Al-Anon stuff. And Mom's laying in bed, biting her nails and checking the door and, did she call and, all that kind of stuff and the arguments that happen. Be able to sit and talk to two people and just talk, from my heart. I'm sorry those things happened and what it caused between the two of you. Those kind of things grew me up as an individual that in ways that I didn't know was going to happen. really grew me up and were things that I could start to carry into my life in real ways, to take accountability of, and so that as I went forward, I knew ways I wanted to live, and now I have a power of which I can go to and learn to live in those ways. I'm a woman who ended up getting married, I was married for 25 years. I stayed at that job for 34 years. I advanced through things in that job without a high school, with only I went back and got my GED. But you guys, the principles of Alcoholics Anonymous, the things I learned here, the transformations I went through, that was my schooling, sitting in service commitments and whatnot, and learning how to work with a group of people, how to keep my mouth shut, how to use the traditions and taking them to work. Principles before personalities. Oh my God, that carried me so far in work meetings and whatnot. Things like that. They're common welfare. It's not about just my idea here, bucko. I may have a good idea, but it doesn't work for everybody in this room, so zip it, or if it doesn't work out, be able to be a woman who doesn't roll her eyes over it didn't work out, in a room of professionals, right? Be able to go, what, this is going to work out too. Why don't I get open-minded and try this? All those things I learned here. Learned how to pray here, learned how to get a practice here of prayer and meditation, and how that has changed me. It just made me a more calm, peaceful person of presence in my life, and be able to deal with things in ways I wouldn't have dealt with before. That marriage didn't work out after 25 years. It was a long haul for about the last, 10 or 15, but to learn to be an honest person, to learn to walk through those things and just, do the things that needed to be done, to try again, to be open to, getting help, to all those kind of things, before just giving up on something. I would have given up on something a long time ago. To be able to be a daughter, that was returned to her parents, right? To walk her parents home, to walk a stepmom home, those kind of things, to be a sister to my brother, to be able to be an auntie to my niece and my nephew. My brother wouldn't have let me spend 2 minutes with his kids if he needed to go on an emergency. He wouldn't have let me spend 2 minutes today. These little flowers here, my nephew sent them up, to us for Happy Valentine's Day. I got to be a mom to those kids because they really didn't have a mom in their life. All the things, how could I lay out to you the opportunities, the things that have come about because of working this program and all my affairs to the best of my ability. The Al-Anon women taught me, look, you're never going to be an angel or a saint, and that thing you use, a halo, is likely to fall down, around your neck and choke the living shit out of you one day, so just get over it, You're not. And I'm not perfect, and I don't profess to be perfect. 41 years later, there's still work to do. But my prayers in the morning, my readings in the morning, these things still keep me open to that big, gracious God that's out there, the opportunities that are a part of my life today that, keep unfolding. Like, I'm still excited about my life. My life is still unfolding at 67 years old, It's different today in ways I couldn't even imagine a year and a half ago, right? I'm still active and involved with Alcoholics Anonymous. The ladies that I sponsor, I met with my sponsor about a week and a half ago, and she was in town, and I still find it exciting. I mean, my God, you can't go, half the stuff people don't do. We don't just make up this stuff. This stuff is real in people's lives, right? Going to H&I and hearing the stories and the panels on the way to the meeting, on the way back from, driving to the prison, and you can't make it up, I don't know. I have a really good life today, and my life, the majority of it I attribute to Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12 steps, the 12 traditions. Being able to take that stuff into my life in some way, shape, or form, I have been transformed as an individual from, that thieving little crazy woman who walked in here at 25 years old to who I am today. And I couldn't be more grateful, and I hope that I always have the desire and the willingness. I don't know where willingness comes from. It comes from someplace beyond. I'm often very thankful just for the gift of willingness that seems to show up, but that I am also hope that I always have the desire to walk into these rooms, to share with you, to reach my hand out, to say hello, to get a number, to call that number, see how the newcomer's doing, and just keeping on and keep learning here. And so I thank you for the opportunity. I'm all over the map tonight. This was not a good talk, but it was good enough, and I hope it touched somebody in the room in one little way. Thank you.